Hello everyone, my name is Tavan and I welcome you all towards my YouTube channel. So today we'll be learning about in disaster management, that is for your GS3, one of the very important subjects for your UPSC preparation. And today we'll be discussing about the basics of disaster management, and I request all of you to properly listen to this lecture. Because it's like a very short, a 5 minutes clip, and in disaster management, there's nothing more to study. So if you study properly, the entire journey itself becomes very easy for you. Now let's get started. Okay. Now, what is a disaster? As per the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, a disaster is a serious disruption of functioning of community which affects the humans, material, economic, and environmental loss. So, what do you mean by disaster? Something which has been affecting the humans, something which has basically been affecting the material aspect, something which is affecting economically, and something which is affecting the environmental loss is considered to be the disaster. Now, the disaster is measured on how many houses are being ruined, all the roads were ruined. Okay, so if very important concept, okay, you should be knowing that if you want to understand how a disaster is measured. So being a district collector or being a person who's working the government side, how are you going to measure the disaster? You're going to measure on two important criteria. One, how many houses have been ruined? Second is, how many roads have been ruined? Okay. Now there are three important components which you need to know. One is about hazard, vulnerability, and then the risk. Once again, what do you mean by hazard? Let me start with the further this one. So first I learned about what is disaster, something which is affecting the humans materially, economically, as well as environmental loss is considered to be disaster. Now what do you mean by hazard? First point, it has the potential to cause injury to life or damage to property or environment. So something which has it can cause injury to life, damage the property or the environment. Three things. I'm repeating the three components. Life, damage to property or the environment is considered to be an hazard. Okay. Now, what do you mean by natural hazard? So, natural hazard, and in hazard, there are basically two categories. One is of natural hazard. Second one is human-made hazard. Now, what do you mean by natural hazard? The natural hazard can basically be about landslide, something which is occurring because of naturally. Like, for example, landslide, tsunami, volcano, floods, drought, storms. So these are the natural hazards. Now, what do you mean by the human-made hazards? They are also known as the anthropogenic. And pollution, deforestation, it's all is done by the human. This is called hazard, done by humans. Anthropogen. Remember, hazard has two types: natural and human-made. And now, second component which we're going to discuss for today is about vulnerability. Now, what do you mean by vulnerability? Means how likely a community is to suffer from a hazard due to certain conditions. Like, because of an hazard, how a person gets affected, that is basically considered to be vulnerability. Like, people get affected because of multiple important parameters. One is about physically, second is economically, third is socially, and the fourth is environmentally. Now, what do you mean by economic vulnerability? For example, these poor people, when these poor people are there, when they have just one source of income, they're more at risk. For example, people who stay at the farmland, and there are huge amount of floods, they get affected. They are the most vulnerable people over there. Second is physical vulnerability. Like, for example, the kind of building people live in is basically, for example, some people live in certain house, there are high chances for it to be affecting with forest fire. Why are they living in that house? Because they're not economically stable to pay pay for it. Third is about social vulnerability. Now, what do you mean by social vulnerability? Elderly or pregnant or disabled people suffers a lot. Like elderly, pregnant people, they suffer a lot. Now, what do you mean by the social vulnerability? As I said, elderly and pregnant or disabled people. Now, environmental vulnerability is basically because of something happening in the environment, it affects them. Like forest fire can basically affect them. Attitudinal vulnerability means, see, sometimes community resist for any particular group, especially in Kerala, Wayanad, and people resist to any particular group. At such situation, they have also been exposed to higher chances of vulnerability. The last component which we'll be discussing today is called as risk. So risk is the measure of expected loss due to an event. Okay. So risk is the measure of expected loss due to an event. Like the four categories of risk are risk acceptance. Once a risk comes, they have to accept it. Risk avoidance. Before a risk comes, you can avoid it. Point number 3, risk reduction. You can reduce the risk. And the risk transfer. You can transfer the risk. So these are the important components which you'll learn for your GS3. Basics about disaster, hazard, vulnerability, and risk. Hope you like this video. If you do like it, please do like, share, and subscribe. Catch you all for the next video, part 2 video of this. Take care, goodbye, and learn and become a great IAS officer.